Okay, picture the scene. It's a moment of just profound grief and completely unprecedented uncertainty. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has just passed away. He leaves behind this very nascent Islamic state, and suddenly the community is plunged into this massive leadership vacuum. Honestly, the very survival of the whole state is hanging in the balance here. So how does a community even begin to move forward from a loss like that? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to explore the incredibly stabilizing, resolute leadership of the first rightly guided Caliph, Abu Bakr Al-Siddiq. We'll look at exactly how he stepped up in the state's most critical hour and basically held a fragmenting world together.
Let's just dive right into our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 main points. First, introducing Al-Siddiq. Second, the events at the Saqifah of Banu Saida. Third, confronting the apostates. Fourth, the traits of a leader. And finally, number 5, a unifying legacy.
All right, Section 1. Introducing Al-Siddiq, the first rightly guided.
So before assuming this monumental mantle of leadership, he was actually known by his given name, Abdullah ibn Abi Quhafa, and he hailed from the incredibly influential Quraysh tribe. Now, this background is absolutely crucial to keep in mind, right? It firmly anchors him within the core societal structure of the time, way before he ever took up the immense responsibility of becoming the first rightly guided caliph after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ.
But of course, history remembers him best by his famous title, Al-Siddiq, and that translates beautifully to the affirmer of the truth. Now you might be wondering, why that specific title? Well, it's because he just unwaveringly affirmed the truth of the Prophet ﷺ. When others hesitated or doubted, especially concerning the miraculous night journey, the Isra and Mi'raj, and really everything else the Prophet brought forth, Abu Bakr's belief was just instant. It was unshakable. He was literally the ultimate validator of the truth.
Moving right along to Section 2, Saqifah Banu Saida and the succession crisis.
To really understand this moment, we have to look at where it all went down. This historic Pledge of Allegiance, it didn't happen in some grand, ornate palace. It happened right here, at the Saqifah of Banu Saida, which is located just northwest of the Prophet's mosque in Medina. This was the exact spot where the community urgently gathered because they recognized that without immediate leadership, the whole thing, everything they had just built, could literally collapse.
And this brilliantly illustrates something really fascinating. The lessons this gathering left behind are huge. You see, it wasn't some chaotic power grab, far from it. Instead, what we see is a fruitful, highly constructive dialogue between the Muhajirun, the emigrants from Mecca, and the Ansar, the helpers native to Medina. Now, were there differences in viewpoint? Yeah, for sure, but they managed those differences with just an incredible amount of respect and esteem among the companions. Ultimately, the thing that triumphed was their shared concern for the state's welfare and the affairs of the Muslims. It was an absolute masterclass in diplomacy that preserved the early community's unity, and it's what resulted in Abu Bakr al-Siddiq receiving the Pledge of Allegiance as Caliph.
Okay, Section 3, Confronting Apostates, an Existential Threat.
To really ground our understanding of the incredibly high stakes here, we have to look at the explicit definition of the threat they were facing, which was apostasy. So this means leaving Islam entirely or committing an act that completely nullifies one's faith. Right after the Prophet's death, you had some tribes who simply refused to pay the mandatory zakat, which basically meant rejecting a core pillar of the state and the faith. Meanwhile, others went even further and started following false claimants to prophethood. The state was literally fracturing at the seams.
And the most severe of these threats? That came from a man known as Musaylama the Arch-Liar. He was leading this massive movement of apostasy. Now, Caliph Abu Bakr didn't just sit down and negotiate with this existential threat. No way. He met it head-on. He decisively dispatched the Muslim army to face Musaylama's forces. In this totally crucial campaign, the state was supported by a large number of the Banu Hanifa tribe in Yamama, and that ultimately led to Musaylama's decisive defeat at the Battle of Al-Jubaylah.
But I want you to pause and just think about this for a second. So what is the actual benefit of this absolute firmness? When you're facing tribes who are refusing to pay a tax, why not just compromise? Why risk war and further division so soon after the monumental loss of the Prophet ﷺ? Why was this kind of unyielding, highly decisive action historically necessary?
Well, the results of this firmness were completely staggering. Look at this. It actively unified the Muslims. It outright prevented the total fragmentation of this very young state. By refusing to budge on the zakat requirement, Abu Bakr was strictly following the path of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, ensuring the completion of the core pillars of Islam. Because, think about it, compromising on a foundational pillar, That would have meant the slow, inevitable unraveling of the entire faith.
All right, moving to Section 4, Traits of a Leader and a Unique Duality.
When we take a step back and look at the core qualities of Caliph Abu Bakr, this really fascinating duality emerges. On one hand, we see this immense firmness, the exact kind of grit that held a fracturing nation together. But that sits right next to this incredible asceticism and really deep humility. And then you add to that his profound wisdom, his absolutely unparalleled love for Allah and his Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course, his defining trait, absolute truthfulness. It's exactly this unique, kind of rare combination that made his leadership so incredibly effective.
Now, what's really interesting about this next point is how perfectly his highly practical approach is captured in his own words. Just look at his advice here. He says, if you set out on a journey, do not burden yourself or your companions. Do not become angry with your people or your companions. Consult them in matters, practice justice, and avoid oppression. I love this because this isn't the rhetoric of some untouchable autocrat, right? This is the very grounded guidance of an empathetic leader who deeply values consultation and absolutely despises oppression. And then we have this second remarkable quote. He states, "This is my opinion. If it is correct, it is from Allah alone. If it is wrong, it is from me and Satan, and Allah and his messenger are innocent of it." Talk about profound personal accountability. Here you have the leader of the entire Muslim world literally removing his own ego from the equation completely. He takes total 100% personal blame for any potential errors while attributing every single success and correctness entirely to the divine. It's amazing.
And that brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, a unifying legacy and his enduring footprint.
Caliph Abu Bakr Al-Siddiq passed away in Medina in the year 13 AH. What's truly astonishing to wrap your head around here is that his time as caliph, it actually lasted only about 2 years. But in that incredibly brief, almost fleeting window, he successfully navigated a massive succession crisis, defeated a mass rebellion, totally secured the pillars of the faith, and essentially set the gold standard for what righteous leadership actually looks like.
So, I want to leave you with a reflection, drawn from one of his most powerful sayings. Beware of lying, for lying is contrary to faith. Think about that. If lying actively nullifies faith, then what standard of truth does true leadership actually demand from us? You know, Abu Bakr wasn't just called the affirmer of the truth because of his past belief, he actually lived it as a governing principle. It's a profound, really challenging standard of integrity to reflect on, both in his time and absolutely in ours. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, stronger understanding of the incredible legacy of Al-Siddiq.